I'm just Nick, and this is the Eventide Space. How friggin' psychedelic. It's likely that if there's any psychedelia in play here, it has something to do with the fact that it's about 1,000,000 degrees. I'm unshaven. Not in my usual spot. And I've used a different miking scheme today because it's 1,000,000 degrees. I don't believe in air conditioning because Bob Dylan doesn't believe in air conditioning. So I'm just rolling with what I feel. And I'm not wearing pants. I'm wearing shorts. I am. You can see them. So this is essentially a studio reverb unit in a stomp box format. It's really a studio multi-effects unit with the emphasis on reverb, but also a lot of delay action and a lot of modulation action going on here. And the reason you would sink your hard-earned dollars into a piece of gear like this is that you're going to get just top-notch reverbs across the full range of types. They're not going to sound cheesy. I picked about the most over-the-top preset as is on here so that you could get a sense of what this thing can do. And even with all this modulation and delay and reverb happening at once, frankly, to me, it still sounds good. The trails are real smooth. The decay on all of the algorithms is real smooth. And, you know, the spring reverbs sound like spring reverbs. The plates sound like plates. The halls sound like halls. And when you want to get kind of spacey with it, though it'll go pretty extreme, still just the basic kind of tonal signature, I guess, of the algorithms is always really good and really musical and appealing. And that's even before we talk about sort of the enormous number of features on this thing. You've got a whole bunch of controls that apply to you know, every basic algorithm. Usual ones like decay time, size, you know, delay time for an added delay. EQ control over the repeats or reflections, so you can darken things up or brighten them up, and a mix knob, a contour knob that gives you further tonal control, and then you have two knobs that vary from preset to preset that are called the X and Y knobs, and if there's a modulation on the preset, then usually they control the depth and speed of the modulation, but they sometimes control other things as well. It's a stereo reverb. You can output to 2 amps or to 2 channels on a audio interface, for instance, to get true stereo sort of spread and width. And what you heard right there is just a single Fender Princeton mic with a single ribbon mic. So you can imagine that if we were to use a stereo algorithm and put it into 2 channels or into 2 amps, that everything would be that much bigger. But I'll tell you something, the important thing about having really good sounding algorithms is not always that you can make things sound huge, but that you can make them sound very deep and still make them work in a mix. Like you could apply this to a guitar sound or a keyboard sound and not go with a stereo reverb, because you don't want it to then kind of spread out and dominate everything else happening in the mix, but you still want a very intense, very present kind of a reverb sound, but just on a single part. And that's where this thing really, really excels. Stereo's great, and it does it as well as any reverb unit in a stomp box that I've ever heard, but perhaps more importantly is the fact that it does mono with hugeness and control. You're able to switch the impedance and signal level expected by the input and output between a guitar input for high impedance pickups and instrument level sounds or lines. So you can run keyboards into this. I've run a Moog into it. Sounds great, works great. Tons of headroom. You can't make this thing clip or start to sound weird by hitting it with a strong signal. You can use these foot switches in 2 different modes. One is called the play mode, and that allows you to step up and down through presets, either the ones that came from the factory or ones that you create. It allows you to use this middle switch as a hot switch, which kind of gives you 2 presets in one, because it allows you to set whatever settings you want on the knobs and assign them to this switch. So when the hot switch is depressed, you get one sound, and press the hot switch, and whatever parameters you had assigned, it's basically another preset within a preset. And you can use it to make small changes when you're playing live. For instance, maybe you want to use the same reverb on your lead part as you do on your rhythm part, but when you start playing that super psychedelic solo, you want things to get just a little bit bigger, or you want the modulation a little heavier. That's your hot switch. Boom. So that's in preset mode, that you use these to step through the presets. In play mode, I may have said play mode. It really is a million degrees here, so forgive me. I'm a little... in play mode, you basically can use this for tap tempo instead of to step through presets. And this is just your bypass switch in play mode. So what else can I tell you? I guess I'm just going to show you just a few more of the presets that came from the factory. I did a lot of tweaking, but it's always a good sign when a unit that comes with presets that are actually usable and musical and not stupid sounding. And not that many multi-effects units do that. Of course, Eventide has a really strong reputation for making digital studio processors. So it's not that surprising they put some thought into making the presets sound musical and usable. A short plate type of sound there. Let's see what else we got in here. Verb. Kind of like a ducking reverb that drops down when you hit the actual note. So it's super dry, and then the reflections kick in afterwards. Pretty cool. Tremolo Verb. By the way, you notice that as I switch, there's a little bit of a delay. That's by design, but you can actually switch that off, so you have instantaneous switch between patches. But you have that option to have a delay between them, so that your reflections trail off, and it sounds a little bit more natural when you change a preset while you're playing. Tremolo Verb is tremolo and reverb. tasty. And I think if we go down a little bit here, we'll find some standard types of algorithms, like a room algorithm. Tasteful room reverb. Again, I would have no problem using this as a primary reverb source in a mix. And remember, you can also, because it has line level input and output, you can use it as an outboard processor and actually run tracks through it. Take them out of the box, take them out of your computer and your interface, and use this as like an outboard studio processor to process already recorded tracks. Here's a Hall algorithm. Very tasteful, sort of medium-sized Hall. Very natural, nothing cheesy about it. You really don't want cheesy reverbs unless you're going for cheesy reverbs. Let's see what their spring sounds like. That's a real test of a reverb unit, is the spring emulation. Wow. AME spring. I don't know what that means. I think it sounds pretty cool. Let's bypass. Let's turn on the Princeton spring reverb and compare. Just for fun. I go pretty deep with it. Princeton definitely doesn't have this full frequency range, and it's a little ringy. This has some kind of modulation happening on it too. Let's see if we can get rid of that. Again, we're not set up doing an attempt at a perfect comparison here, but I will say that just the tonal signature and the sort of realism of the spring that we're getting out of this and out of the Princeton, definitely in the same ballpark. I mean, the Princeton doesn't particularly sound more real to my ear than this thing does, oddly enough. So I think I'm going to leave you with a suggestion, which is that if you are in need of a range of reverb sounds, both for live playing, but possibly also for recording purposes, and even as an outboard processor to use in mixing, this is an amazingly cost-effective box. And you should get a hold of the folks at Rock and Roll Vintage, and they will totally hook you up. Until next time,